Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks.
Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try to make your world a little weirder. I'm Niall.
And I'm Kyle, and I'm going to be completely honest with you here, and not to part the curtain too much, but boy, am I way more alert for part 2 of Mr. Beater here than I was last time. Every once in a while, we have these episodes where I'm already tired from working. And then
we're just being alive.
And being alive just generally. It's exhausting. And then we start talking about these things that are just sometimes hard to follow, sometimes not too hard to follow, but still like so ridiculous that, look, my brain at the end of that one, I started to feel a bit like mush. And now I'm feeling a lot more alert, a lot more. I mean, I was literally like, I remember sitting through that being like, man, what the fuck? What is Fort Knox? And trying to remember.
It really is one of those things where like this is one of those guys who just did what he did for a long time. And so like I trying to condense like 80 hours of a man rambling about conspiracy theories into an episode of this podcast gets really messy, especially when like whenever we get to these grand global ones that you either have to just be like, yeah, there are 3 factions around the government that run the entire world and it's this, and this, and leave it at that, or you have to go really nitty gritty about it.
Yeah.
It gets so, you get so in the weeds so easily.
Yeah.
At least I do.
Yeah. And can I help? So this is of course, Doctor. This is Peter D. Beater. Episode 2.
It is actually Dr. Beater.
Is he a doctor?
I believe so.
That's really crazy, actually. The amount of these people who end up being doctors. Well, let me. Do you mind if I kick this off real quickly with an email that I'm thinking is maybe one of the quickest turnaround emails we've ever had from an episode going live to a response to the subject.
Yeah, I think that this is this probably could set a new record for us. So go ahead.
Yeah, it's the quickest turnaround and the shortest email we've ever gotten, and it is just from Jay, and it says, "Peter D. Beater, that's got to be a fake name." And that's the whole email.
I will reiterate this. This will be part of the recap of episode 1. There are people that dug very deeply into trying to figure out if this guy was a real person. Everyone, your immediate reaction is, "Oh, Peter Beater. Okay, that's a goofy name.
Very
funny. That's probably fake. Oh, it's some sort of code name or they changed his name or something." It doesn't seem to be that's the case. I did a pretty deep dive on the internet, and while it's hard to find a lot of original sources of this guy, the book seems to exist, and the obituary seems to exist, and that seems to be the name linked to both of those things. So yeah, it seems to be his actual name.
And just to be clear, you go almost 7 years trying to look into this stuff, and you get really pretty good at Googling. So I imagine Niall's Google foo is pretty good. So I think this guy's real name was Peter D. Beater. As funny as that is.
Yeah. Peter David Beater. That is the one thing with researching this. When I tried to after a while, when I was looking up this guy's name, it just started showing me the comic writer Peter David.
Oh.
And I was, because he's got a lot more articles written about him than Dr. Peter D. Beater. But if you put his full name in, you will start just hearing about interviews and announcements for the comic writer Peter David, who wrote a lot of X Factor and Hulk and stuff. So
I see.
yeah.
Well, that's this is going to be the wrap up episode for DPDB, which
Yes,
I believe that's the isn't that the Hellboy guys?
That's a better. That's probably a better poll than what I was about to try to say. I was going to say that was your search on XTube. But
oh, come on. I don't even know what DB could be. What's DB? Dick butt?
Know. Double butt?
Delicious
double balls.
Venus.
Yeah, there you go. No, but the DPDB is what the organization that Hellboy works for.
They're the porn branch of the Hellboy. What does the BPRD do? I actually haven't read
it's the Bureau of Paranormal Research and Development.
Right. That's what it is. Thank you. I knew you'd.
Hellboy is one of my favorite things. The Hellboy comics are some of my favorite favorite pieces of media in the world. So
yeah,
it's
because all the porn in it.
Oh yeah, because it's so fucking porny.
Sorry. So what's
all those pointy Mike Mignola boobs?
Oh yeah.
So okay, just to quickly go over some of the ground that we covered last week, just for people who don't quite remember. Dr. Beater is he worked in economics and as a lawyer in his actual career, but then he also was a kind of conspiracy theorist, if you want to put him under that broad umbrella. Became famous for a book about kind of the hidden machinations of the world economy and how businesses and basically wealth is consolidating power to run the world. And then he did 80 audio letters, as he called them, which was effectively an early conspiracy podcast of the oeuvre of a guy ranting in his truck on his lunch break.
Yeah.
Where it just is like hour-long audio of him just telling you all about these theories that he has, which he believes are true. And the big one that he became kind of famous for was that in Fort Knox, they have removed all of the gold to be used for the secret cabal of the Rockefeller crime syndicate, effectively.
Right.
And for like world domination.
Which I guess was like to destabilize the value of American
Yeah, they're
money?
going to tank the dollar.
Yeah,
they're going to tank the dollar and have the only thing that has actual value because we got off the gold standard. It's like part Federal Reserve, part Illuminati, but then substitute all of that for a lot of people hiding missiles in places around the world.
I also think the other weirdest thing from this from first episode is the concept of the Zionist Bolsheviks as being one of the like shadowy cabal groups that's vying for power. And then it was the
Khazars and the 13th tribe. So yeah, the three factions are the Rockefellers, which is kind of your standard Illuminati group of the rich people in America. Then you have your Bolshevik Zionists, and you have the new Kremlin rulers. And there's some infighting between them, as originally the Rockefellers were kind of allied with the Bolshevik Zionists, but then after the new Kremlin rulers took over Russia and ousted them, they basically became a faction destabilizing the U.S. as the Rockefeller Four, the four like sons of they were the third generation of the Rockefeller Syndicate. Were still trying to take the world stage. They started getting killed in these accidents, quote unquote. And that destabilized everything, allowed the Bolshevik Zionists to gain a foothold in America. And they're now starting to amass missiles and power to strike back against the new Kremlin rulers. And we left off with the tease of the fact that we're soon going to space in this story.
I've been sitting here waiting to hear about how this ends up in outer space. It was inevitable, but I'm excited to find out the truth.
Yes. So let's go ahead and get started without much further ado here. We luckily can leave the anti-Semitic part of this behind for the most part, other than just like the concept of some of these factions, and get into just like the weirdness of secret missile programs, space stuff, and other parts of this kind of world domination plan. So, throughout the last late 70s, for the most part, like throughout the 70s at least, United States and Soviet Union were in the Cold War. Like we had the whole Cold War thing going on. They seemed to be at odds, but what you don't realize is they're actually working together in a way that is described here as a pincer movement to gobble up the entire world. The whole like staged conflict between Washington and Moscow was just trying to polarize the world and to basically form camps dominated by these two superpowers to make things easier to basically consolidating world power very heavily.
Okay.
In an attempt to eventually get to a one world government.
So you're saying the Cold War was a psyop?
Yes.
Okay. I follow.
It was, yeah, and some of that was involved with why JFK was killed, and all those kinds of things. It's there is a concerted effort by these factions to keep war happening around the world because it allows for easy transference of money and hiding large amounts of money and collecting power by keeping people occupied with war. So that is one of those places where it's like, sure, war is a good cover for a lot of shady shit. I don't think it's for the specific thing he thinks it's for, but he's close. You know, he's so close.
Yeah, they sometimes are.
And so basically the Cold War stuff is what led them to the idea of just like a full-on no-win war. And that started with the Korean War and into the Vietnam War, and then anything kind of coming after that. These wars that like don't really end. No one really wins them. No one really, I mean, people that fight in them lose them because that's just how war is.
I'm sorry. I thought the United States won them, Niall. Is that not not right? Am I not, because we're like the strongest and have the most guns and the biggest biggest men in army.
Yeah.
Right?
So you can keep thinking that, but in thinking that, you're also playing into the clause of these cartels that are keeping you in a state of war. So
okay, so you're telling me that they kind of they established like a war kayfabe.
Yeah, they really are just like they're playing out these things to just keep everyone entertained and busy so they can do all their shit behind the scenes.
Can you imagine how boring it would be if like because what they're doing here is essentially they're sitting down and they're talking to these other countries who are, I guess, in on the whole shtick to the no-win war, and they're saying, all right, so every single match that we have, a match being a war. This is a wrestling metaphor for those of you out there who maybe don't know.
And what's funny is we're about to go into a thing that caps off the wrestling metaphor very well. So
okay, well, they all sit down and they all agree we're going to end every single match with a disqualification. Is that am I hearing this right? Can you imagine how pissed off the crowd is going to be? Because I'm sitting here in America like, let's fucking go, American troops. Let's kick their ass. Let's win the war. And to just
I can't imagine that because I did watch an episode of Raw last year.
Yeah.
So but here's the thing.
Yeah.
That we have the Vietnam War, the Korean War. Those are like match 1 and match 2. Now the big stip match that's going to end the feud between Russia and America is going to be something that it's just labeled Nuclear War 1. And it's going to be fought heavily on American soil.
What?
And it was supposed to come to pass in the late 1970s.
Okay. That I was going to say, I don't remember reading about a nuclear war. But the whole idea, so what caused the match to not go off as planned?
The rise of the new Kremlin rulers. ousting the Bolshevik Zionists. So the entire plan had to get scrapped.
Okay.
Basically, the NWO invaded
Right.
and took away the entire push for these lower mid card guys that were going around in WCW pre, like it really is just this thing where you can look at this and be like, oh, I'm just gonna put all of this onto like wrestling booking. I'm starting to think of because like I used to think of conspiracy theories in comic book metaphors,
Right.
and this could totally just be my mind being too simple to grasp the complexity of like the world stage, But it went from like comic book plot lines to now being wrestling's booking. And it's weird how well they kind of gel together into one thing.
I get it. For the people out there who don't know anything about wrestling, maybe the last 45 seconds to a minute was very confusing, but I understood everything perfectly clear.
Good. So yeah, this fucked up the whole Rockefeller Soviet alliance when the new Kremlin rulers took over, like we were talking about, and you then get this, the Rockefellers trying to take in the Bolshevik Zionists, and that allows them to get a foothold in America as the Rockefellers are losing their foothold, and you get a whole upheaval of the dynamic that had been established for the last like 20 years. Or no, longer. Sorry, the first two full generations of Rockefellers, and the fracture of the alliance started with what is known as the underwater missile crisis, which is another thing that is seemingly a creation of Dr. Peter Beater, and then was broken completely apart by what is known as the Battle of the Harvest Moon. And if you can't guess by the title, that one takes place in space.
Oh, I was going to guess that it was a fight over who gets their turn with the GameCube to play Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life.
Oh, okay.
I think that was on the GameCube.
What's funny is Harvest Moon: It's Wonderful Life was I think so.
That's the only one I ever played was the GameCube one.
The only one I ever played was the N64 one because my brother was a big fan of it, so I played some of it. And so like when Animal Crossing came out on GameCube, my brother was like, "Oh, it's like Harvest Moon." Yeah. And I didn't really care about Harvest Moon, so I did play the first Animal Crossing and liked it. But it like I never was a big Harvest Moon fan.
I just remember I liked the crops and I liked talking to the townsfolk and marrying the redheaded lady with the short hair. That's what I remember from that game.
Yeah. Hey, I can't tell you you're wrong.
I'm just saying there would be a certain type of people, and maybe it's the shadowy cabal that is trying to rule the world. There are certain types of people who would be vying for control of the GameCube to get at that video game. Maybe it's not you, but those people might. That's all I'm saying.
So here, there are a couple things more of like the kind of landlocked politics of this thing. There's, basically the Bolshevik Zionists and the Rockefeller Cartel represent two different kind of political ideals. So they were never going to fully get along. Where like the Rockefeller Cartel represents, by the way it's described, corporate socialism, which is I don't think a thing. Yeah. And the Bolsheviks are quote unquote state socialists. You do have to remember that these were being written in the 70s. So socialism was kind of a dirty word at that point. And so basically he describes the Bolsheviks are state socialists who seek to control all power into the hands of a few themselves by way of government. Whereas the Rockefeller Cartel are corporate socialism, which is a concentration of power into the hands of a few by way of corporations with minimum governmental interference.
That, to me,
I don't think either of those make sense. But
that kind of sounds like an already existing system that I'm vaguely familiar with because I kind of have to live in it. I don't know if that's necessarily what socialism is, but what do I know? What do I know?
I don't think you can describe socialism as putting power in the hands of a few. I think that's kind of antithetical to it.
Jesus.
Yeah. So I did also mention in the same time period the whole Jonestown thing that was a cover up for a missile base.
That's fucking crazy, right?
Yeah. So yeah, they basically they were going towards this whole planned blow off match of a nuclear war that got upended by a new faction rising and having the new Kremlin rulers take over Russia, so they can't do their little proxy war anymore. Their fake war, not proxy, I guess. That their pseudo war. So their plans get fucked at the end of the 70s. And the whole thing with the new Kremlin rulers is that they are not nearly as staunchly atheist. So if you remember correctly, the Rockefellers were kind of going anti-Christian ideals, and the Bolshevik Zionists, of course, were not pro-Christian. But the new Kremlin rulers actually allowed the first shipment of Bibles into Russia in 1979, and starting and like Dr. Billy Graham went to Moscow for like a Christian conference in 1982. Like there was this shift in the politics of Russia that allowed Christianity to come in, and that goes against the whole like idea of what the Rockefellers and the Bolshevik Zionists want.
Okay, now can I just want to throw a thought out there. But it is a little like thinking about the idea of like this shadowy cabal that's trying to rule the world and wants to like seize power over everyone. It's a little confusing when it's like, oh, we need to undermine Christianity to do that. Because you take one look at a video of like one of those like mega churches, and those are like the most easily controllable people if you say the right stuff, you know? Like,
yeah.
So I feel like it would, like, why wouldn't they just consider, Christianity being the dominant, religion with stuff like that, the phenomenon of like mega churches? Why wouldn't that just be like, oh, we can manipulate this to our control? Like what's the thought process of like disrupting, the dominant religion that has that kind of shit going on,
Well, these people are evil, and
right?
Christianity is good.
Oh, I forgot about that. Right. No, sorry.
So they're going to try to get people from the good thing to the bad thing.
Right. So if everybody's doing the bad thing, i.e. not Christianity. So for instance, I'll just throw another one out there. Judaism. They're going to, I guess, somehow have better control over them or something.
Yeah, it really. I'm glad you understand.
I feel like I need to remind. I only do this once every like 30 to 50 episodes, but I'm just going to very quietly and quickly remind everybody that I am in fact Jewish.
Yeah, happy Hanukkah.
Thank you. It's been a weird Hanukkah full of me doing lots of work and not seeing my family, but soon we'll get to. I'm looking forward to this week off where I can start plotting some more ideas with my conspiracy overlords and see what other kind of like schemes we can cook up,
Yeah. So let's get into let's work our way up to the moon, okay? Do you want to start talking about some of how we get to space in this story?
Sure. No, I would love to start working my way up to the moon. I mean, it's the only place where I'm safe from capitalism so far, but that seems like it could change. I was going to say maybe that could be changing.
So here's kind of the road to the moon in this story. We have to go back to.
You have to take a ship, not a road.
True.
So
I'll take a rainbow road. Okay. So the whole we can go with the tied to the Rockefellers are other rich families, including the Carnegies. The Carnegies started a thing called the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Now, back in like,
I thought the Carnegies just had like a really big haul, and that's how they made their money.
Well, I mean, they do have the big haul, and but they also have like a lot of money. And if you know anything about rich people, is that like even with the big haul, they're going to still have to amass like large amounts of wealth.
Yeah, that's fair.
And what's a better way to make it seem like you're a really good person? Other than having a thing where you're paying for international peace.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Now, this is actually an organization that is all about creating peace through a one world government. And it funded stuff through World War One and various other kind of large scale, world conflicts. And they got into a lot of power around the time that Woodrow Wilson and his election in 1916, and were part of the whole thing of him running on keeping us out of the war. And then after becoming elected, he took the U.S. into World War One. So basically, they changed his mind, and they then sent him a telegram urging him to not let the American involvement in World War One end too soon, because they were continuing to make money and amass power and do all those things that these people like to do during war to lead them towards a one world government. This continued throughout the next however many wars, through World War II, through Korea, through Vietnam. The people are pushing for war as a way to amass money and power, and that led to weapons manufacturing.
I mean, like, every once in a while, I feel a weirdly lucid phrase is uttered in this story. But sorry, go ahead.
There's an occasional point where you're like, okay, I'm with you with if you cut out like everything before it and everything after it and just take that one sentence, I can kind of see where you're coming from.
It's funny because divorced from the entire context, that last like 15 seconds that you uttered makes perfect sense, but you add the context of everything else, and it's a little different.
So this was, all of these wars were causing rapid acceleration of advancement in weapons technology. We were getting better weapons to kill each other with quicker and quicker. And in 1960, American scientists invented the
Beatles.
laser.
Or wait, the Beatles were British.
Late 50s, right? Yeah, that was also not the Americans. So, I mean...
Stupid. Really stupid. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Man, my favorite American export, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones.
Hey, I'm John Lennon, and this is the Beatles, is what he sounded like.
Oh, God. So, yeah, we created the laser. Jesus. Early lasers were crude and not very powerful, but it was a pretty interesting thing for these people, and they wanted to progress it further. So they eventually started to progress their interests in beam weapons. And yes, we are going towards space lasers.
I was going to say, I like where this is going.
Yeah, so around the same time as all of this stuff in the 1960s, we also, the space race was in full swing. In 1957, there was Sputnik 1, the first man-made Earth satellite to orbit the Earth. And that was the Soviets. And so we basically kept progressing lasers at the same time as we were trying to get into space. So this led to the kind of almost like a military race for the moon, which you remember a very, very early episode of mine where I was talking about the plans to nuke the moon.
Yes, yeah.
This is that same kind of time period where like the moon was being viewed as like a military asset. If whoever can reach there first can like basically take control of it and use it for their own purposes.
I think we even kind of touched on that a little bit in the Lost Cosmonaut episode.
Yeah. It gets brought up quite frequently because, hey, this was a thing that actually happened.
Yeah.
There was a race for militarization of space that led to multiple like treaties to basically stop various world powers from trying to militarize space. And that is a thing that I believe those treaties are still in effect to this day. But what you don't know is that the Rockefeller brothers in 1961 started this kind of two-pronged plan. They were doing all this stuff on Earth that we've kind of covered already, supporting disarmament and peace and all these things on the public face, but then putting us in forever wars in the background. And then they also used NASA and the Apollo project to effectively start seizing control of space and starting with the moon. They wanted to take actual control over the moon as a tactical militaristic resource and set up bases there, set up beam weapons there, so that they have basically we have Fort Moon under control of the Rockefeller Cartel.
And that's where they took all the gold bullions from Fort Knox?
I don't think they actually fully went there, but I believe it was part of the funding for it. Some of this stuff was like some of the bullion was used for that.
Okay.
Yeah, so we got the first manned mission to Mars, the Apollo 17 in 1972, but even before that, starting in there were earlier voyages to the moon that they don't publicly admit. They were used to basically do these secret missions to take control of the moon for the military purposes. So we got the public one with the whole Neil Armstrong stuff in 1969, and before that there were these secret ones for the military, effectively. And then during the whole Watergate scandal, so while that was happening and capturing public attention, they built plans for a full-blown U.S. moon base were being carried out on a secret base on the island of Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. Now, this is kind of important because this base supposedly actually exists. I believe it is a real base that is used to launch and service Skylab's space station stuff.
Okay.
So this is like a real place, but supposedly it's actually also being used for this military mission to arm the moon with space lasers.
Not a funny joke or anything, but it just occurred to me how cool it has to be like, yeah, I work on stuff that they take up into outer space.
Yeah, it's gotta be like
feeling.
sick as fuck. Yeah, I totally agree. So we're now in like the 1970s, and the underwater missile crisis will come up here because this is a Dr. Peter Beater joint. Because this is one of his stories, we're hiding missiles everywhere. So there are missiles being put into space. There are missiles at all these secret bases, and there's also the underwater missile crisis. Supposedly, this is a major crisis which to this day has never been made public officially. The Soviet Navy was planting small underwater launch short-range missiles with nuclear warheads inside of them in the territorial waters of America. They were going to be planted, close to the actual targets, and were able to be fired at a moment's notice by satellite command. If they were actually used, they would destroy target areas along the coasts with effectively zero warning time, and it would be the perfect first strike. So this was all going into, I believe, into that nuclear war one. So they were setting up for this by planting secret missiles, short-range missiles, off the coast of America to target high-value targets to start this world war.
So
this nuclear war.
Wait, who put wait?
The Soviets.
Oh, the Soviets put the missiles there. Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
They were planted by means of small, sonar-absorbing, super quiet mini submarines designed to move in and out of American territorial waters without being detected by coastal sonar defense nets. So because of the whistleblowing of this and the audio letters by Dr. Beater, the late General George S. Brown, then chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, was able to take action. And despite the best efforts of then Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, Brown was able to persuade General Ford to give him the go-ahead to order the U.S. Navy to remove these missiles. This led to a meeting in September of 1976 between Dr. Beater and an associate and General Brown in his Pentagon office. And in that meeting, General Brown was provided the locations of a second round of Soviet underwater missiles by Dr. Beater. And this information was able to be kind of hidden from Kissinger to avoid any counter action that would keep the Soviet Rockefeller alliance stuff in place. Basically, Kissinger seems to be working with the Rockefeller Soviet alliance to keep these plans from being foiled by Dr. Beter and General Brown. And because of this like actual meeting between the two, they were able to bypass Kissinger.
But what's
and actually like remove missiles.
What's Kissinger's play here? It's like they were. It comes out that there's these missiles there, and Kissinger's advice is like, "Oh, actually, do not take the missiles away. The missiles of instant death. Do not remove them."
This is the thing. There's no more. That is all the information that I was given.
The fuck? So we have to fill in the blanks in this.
It's just this little like West Wing scene of like God. Henry Kissinger being out of the room, so they're able to do this thing, and yeah,
it just doesn't make sense. I mean, yeah,
no, not at all.
How does Kissinger has some sort of a genius plan to tell him to leave nukes like off the coast?
I mean, he is the Secretary of State, and he can just say that like Dr. Beter is not worth listening to, or these things don't exist or whatever, I guess. But it is kind of weird that just like out of nowhere, there's like, oh yeah, and Henry Kissinger is trying to make sure there can be nukes in territorial waters. So yeah, this basically led to the fact that there are these missiles planted on the ocean floor in both the Atlantic and the Pacific. They're the ones targeted to the U.S., which got removed, and then the U.S. had actually planted bigger ones, very large warheads off the ocean floor or in the ocean floor near Russia to basically do the same thing to the Soviets. So there's this secret underwater détente happening between the two, where they're both trying to position these wild munitions underwater to attack each other. And luckily we have Dr. Beter, or else we could have had nuclear war.
Even in our fiction about war and stuff like this, we can't help but have it all kind of come down to a dick measuring contest.
Yeah. So the new Kremlin rulers at the same time were preparing for a much bigger surprise, much bigger than any underwater missile crisis. And that was that in autumn of 1977, we were nearing the actual operational status of these beam weapons at a secret military base in the Copernicus crater on the moon. And on the night of the harvest moon, September 27th, 1977, the base was attacked by the Soviet Union on the moon and put out of action. So our secret beam weapon-filled moon base was attacked in the Battle of the Harvest Moon by Soviets and destroyed.
Wow, that's crazy. How?
They had been involved in this very intensive program to develop a family of particle beam weapons which fire subatomic particles at a target at virtually the speed of light. And a neutron beam weapon was fired from an orbiting manned satellite, killing all of the astronauts at the American moon base.
Oh.
So they basically just got vaporized by a neutron beam weapon.
Okay, but so if we have neutron beam weapons that can just vaporize people in an instant with like no warning, what do we even need nukes for? That's like even more direct too. Like you just fucking have a, like, I guess I don't understand the point of nukes when you can just vaporize people with beam energy.
The only thing that I can think of is that like nukes are the public threat. Nukes are the thing that the public knows about. The beam weapons are used for the secret shit, like attacking the World Trade Center and destroying moon bases and stuff. Like that is the next generation stuff that the public doesn't know about unless you're one of these people on conspiracy forums. Yeah. And now us.
Yeah. Well, and it also just like, it seems like setting off nuclear war would defeat the purpose of wanting to rule the world. So like, why not just stick to beam weapons, I guess? But yeah, I get what you're saying.
So you might ask yourself, the Soviet satellite that was used in this attack, could that possibly have been a real thing?
I was just about to ask that.
Supposedly, this Russian satellite was partially disabled during the battle, and this is what we know as Cosmos 954, which 4 months after this battle came down to Earth in northern Canada in what was described to the public as a crash, but was actually an emergency landing. So this was, and I believe that Cosmos 954 was maybe, I don't remember if it was manned or unmanned, supposedly, but in the world of Dr. Beater, it was a manned satellite that had a giant fucking beam, like neutron laser on it that could be used to destroy an entire fucking moon base, and then it crashed in Canada. So
Okay.
So basically, the Battle of the Harvest Moon was like the coup by the Kremlin rulers to basically take over the world stage. Like this was a big turning point for everything when the Soviet Union was able to seize a lot of power that they didn't have before, that like the Rockefellers had, and take a bigger part of the world stage for themselves. It has led to this whole thing where both sides now have a lot more of the like beam weapons and stuff, and we're starting to get an acceleration of basically military arsenals on both sides, where there are like floating platforms with particle beams on them in space, and they develop like cloaking technologies to be able to use them on like just in the skies on Earth. So supposedly, at least at some point, there were like borderline fucking Independence Day over every major American city, Soviet hovering platforms with particle beams trained down on them. And that led to the need for an American, like an American retort to that.
Okay.
And because it's Dr. Beater, we
Yeah.
had to get that to involve missiles. So
This guy loves his missiles.
Yeah, it basically they were like, okay, we both have these fucking these beam things. They're really like that is the known quantity. So what can we do to kind of circumvent that and get an upper hand again? And in June of 1980, Dr. Beater described what he called the MX program. And the MX program is the public-facing side of a thing. It's supposedly an actual missile program, with the big MX missile being kind of the public face. It doesn't really matter. But it's an umbrella program which a secret missile system is also being developed. And that thing is called the Minuteman TX. And the Minuteman TX is basically a very powerful missile made from some stuff that we have in military budgets already, that can be housed on train cars.
Okay. Now, is the MX program where we got gender neutral honorifics?
I do believe that it was named after military hardware.
That's
yes.
kind of awesome.
It is. It's they thought missiles would be a good place to come up with some new honorifics for our gender inclusive military.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know. That's
a gender neutral killing field in the military.
Yeah, there we go. So the whole MX thing is these like racetrack mobile bases for missiles that are like that's a real thing, but then the Minuteman TX is like basically smaller missiles that can go aboard special rail cars, and these unique cars are always moving on the rail systems of the US because it evades detection and like any sort of the Russians aren't able to keep track of where these missiles are at any given time, so it gives us a leg up on the things that we know where they are. They don't know where our stuff is, so we can have superiority again and take them out if need be. Basically, it's this weird missile Cold War thing where the Cold War started later than the real world thought it was, because the actual Cold War was a whole setup between the two. It was a play acting by world powers, but now there's actually this missile fucking détente between the new Kremlin rulers and the surviving Bolshevik people in America, and also kind of the Rockefellers still, to make these railcar missiles known as Minuteman TX, or also Midget Man, which are being kept always moving on special rail cars around the U.S. It's really fucking weird. But that is basically we're just going for like stealth first strike capability here.
Let me tell you, the inclusion of invisible nonstop movement missiles in the Cold War really shifts the dynamic in an alarming way. I feel like the public should probably know more about this because presumably the technology's only gotten better. There could be missiles over every American household right now.
It really feels. I mean, Dr. Peter died in like 1984 or something, so there's been plenty of time for the like missile race to progress much further. There could be tiny missiles trained at every single one of us right now, if we were to kind of take this type of thinking to its logical extents. Now, another like weird little aside that I was not expecting is that some of these stealth missile programs were then used on naval warships and stuff with their own like certain special bases. And in the spring of 1982, this spawned some naval warfare that became known as the Falklands War. So the Falklands War is the public-facing side of this secret missile armament race in the Southern Hemisphere by way of Soviets and the U.S., and that just is what it got called for the public.
Okay. Not only could there be missiles hovering over all of our houses, but it turns out there could also be a million fake wars happening at any given moment too, it sounds like.
Yeah, there's a bit of just like, well, like the Falklands War wasn't fake. It just the reasons given to the public were wrong because they weren't factoring in
the invisible missiles,
tiny missiles, right. on naval bases owned by these three cartels. It really just kind of goes all over the place here. Then we have in 1982, one of the last things that he actually brought up in his audio letters, because he stopped doing them in 1982, was what he called phantom warplanes, which are actual straight up planes that use superconducting electromagnetic field equipment to bend light waves around them to make them visually untraceable. So this is our actual like invisibility for aircraft. So this is one of his last things that he was able to give to the public was knowledge of these phantom warplanes developed by the U.S.
Now, I realize we've come a really long way in talking about this guy's theories and info and stuff. Does he ever explain like how he knows this?
I mean, he talks about a lot of times it comes down to generals that he's talked to. He does have like from his time working at the Import-Export Bank, he has like some ties with people. Like he I'll just say this, for a conspiracy theorist, he has enough kind of connections in his past to be able to say these things and have people who don't care if it's real believe him, you know.
Okay.
For people that like don't really like he's got, it's like people saying that Bob Lazar is believable because he worked at NASA,
right?
It's because this guy worked in the World Economic Stage, or at least he was he worked with the government. He's then, of course, he probably made connections there, and that's where he's getting this information. I believe he even said that a lot of it came from generals and people like that. So
okay, gotcha.
Yep. So yeah, unfortunately, after some of that kind of stuff, there's a little bit of stuff about space shuttles that are being used in ways that were hidden from the public view, but not a lot of specifics that are really that important. That's kind of a lot of the stuff that he talked about. That is a lot of the works of Dr. Peter Beater.
Also, I want to very quickly, because I know Bob Lazar did not work for NASA.
No, you're right. I fucked that up.
I know who you're thinking of, but it was not Bob Lazar.
I pulled the wrong name.
The metaphor remains the same, but take Bob Lazar and insert a UFO guy who worked at NASA. But sorry, I knew that was one that would get people to maybe comment on. and I wanted to save you
look,
before.
I do too many of these episodes. There are too many names.
It's okay. We were talking about Bob Lazar right before we started recording anyways, so.
Yeah, that's why I went for the poll, and I was wrong.
It's all good.
Who the fuck?
I know what you're talking about. I forget who it is, but I know who you're talking about.
So yeah, 80 after 80 audio letters, Dr. Beater stopped doing these in November of 1982 due to his declining health. He then died a couple years later. There are really not. There's not a lot more. It's weird how little else there is about this guy when he put out so much. Like, there's a lot about the theories. There's not as much about the guy.
How did he die?
I believe it was a heart thing.
Okay, so this
he had a lot of heart conditions throughout his life. And let's see here, after a heart attack in his home. Yeah.
Did you run into anybody saying that he was a victim of one of the heart attack guns that the New World Order seems to employ?
I didn't see anyone specifically bring that up. Like I mentioned, there was that one YouTube channel that claimed to be him.
Oh, right.
But it was just posting old stuff that already existed, so no one really believes it. Because like it was basically just posting a lot of the audio recordings of his letters.
Yeah.
So they weren't contributing any new information or new content, so people just kind of like look at it as kind of a repository of his works.
Yeah. Now, for people who maybe don't know, there is a conspiracy that the government has a heart attack gun, and I think that had more crossover in like UFO conspiracy because there were a lot of like UFO researchers who ended up having heart attacks and dying, and people think it's mysterious and that there's a heart attack gun. It's kind of like an older version of Havana syndrome being beamed into our government agents, you know?
Yeah, it's like, I mean, heart attack guns, it's good work if you can get them. Like it comes up in a lot of like the Men in Black stuff and silencing whistleblowers and shit. So if any of this stuff was real from Dr. Beater, maybe he was heart attack gun to death. I don't know. Because he did die of a heart attack, but he also had like heart issues he had to take like multiple breaks from publishing these audio letters because of previous problems. So I think the heart stuff wasn't, he was a good candidate for it because it was already a problem.
Yeah, maybe it was already a problem because he was microdosing heart attack guns. We don't know.
True. They just kept like giving him little bursts.
Yeah.
Whenever he published a new letter that was particularly incendiary.
Yeah, just a little morsel of heart attack.
Yeah. So I guess like I'll just end it with this. Like, if you want to read his entire works, it is all available for free. Because I mentioned this last time. Upon his death, he pretty much just like gave the copyright to the public domain. Like he straight up all of these 80 audio letters have been transcribed. His book has been put up online. You can read like everything about that this guy put out pretty easily on the Bibliotheca Pleiades website. Has a whole archive of all of it. A lot of the audio letters are on YouTube, so you can get a full download if you want to. Like, I baseline covered a lot of what he talked about as like a summary. But if you want to really take a deep dive into it, you can do that.
Those running across those kinds of documents, like just recently when I was covering Gulf Breeze, it was like I covered a lot of the main points and a couple of the more interesting little tidbits that I found. But you could read an over 100-page document that was literally every statement and article and interview with the Gulf Breeze 6. And it's like, you can't. If you want to, more power to you if you want to comb through that stuff,
Yeah, I forgot one thing. He had another little theory about robotoids, which I kind of mentioned last week. And he basically, the Rothschilds were able to like create these synthetic creatures that were used to replace various world leaders and people. So some people mentioned in connection to this as being possible candidates for people who were swapped out for these robotoids are Jimmy Carter, Henry Kissinger, Prime Minister Begin, Stansfield Turner, who was a CIA director at the time. Zbigniew Brzezinski. I don't know exactly who that was. Various space shuttle astronauts. the Shah of Iran, various other people. So like the Rothschilds and Rockefellers were supposedly just like replacing people with synthetic doubles as well.
Okay. So do you think that so we have the Rockefellers, and then we have the Showbiz Pizza Bear type animatronic band, the Rockefeller Explosion. So do you think that maybe on the side they were like, well, we have this robotoid sort of technology. Maybe we can employ that and make some money with pizza and a show.
I do think that the Rockefeller Explosion, which I believe it's actually the Rockefeller Explosion.
Yeah, tomato.
But they just had to change it up a little bit to kind of throw people off the scent. But I do think that a lot of this was funded by Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah, you take one look at the eye of the Showbiz Pizza Bear, and you tell me, was it Showbiz Pizza who had the Rockefeller Explosion? Am I remembering that right?
But then Showbiz Pizza, I believe, was bought by Chuck E. Cheese at one point.
Oh, okay.
So it was Showbiz Pizza, but I lay it all at the foot, at the big feet of Mr. Charles Entertainment Cheese.
You take one look in those dead eyes of Charles Entertainment Cheese and tell me that there isn't New World Order shadowy involvement behind him.
Yeah. So yeah, that is the works of Dr. Beater.
Wow. This is an obscure. How did you did you tell me how you found this? Because I've never heard of this guy in my entire life.
I was trying to do an episode on the Fort Knox being empty.
Oh,
and
okay.
I found a big thing that was actually about just like governmental visits to to Fort Knox, and like way down after reading a lot about the services of Fort Knox was mentions of one Dr. Peter Beater being the main proponent of a conspiracy theory that Fort Knox was empty.
Man.
So then I started researching him, found out he was started seeing stuff about robotoids and space lasers, and realized this is something that I should look into.
Much more interesting. This dude, like, I think we said it in the previous episode, but it's like this dude would have made it on like InfoWars and stuff if he were around nowadays. But he was at such a weird point of conspiracy theory stuff that like he went kind of unknown into the dark, or for the most part, relatively unknown.
Yeah. He would like call into places from a landline phone at his house. And so like a lot of the stuff that's recorded of him is it sounds like it's from over a phone. But yeah, he recorded like 80 episodes of a conspiracy podcast, basically.
So wild.
From his house. So yeah, I think that'll probably take us to the big question.
Yeah. Hit me with it.
Now, for this big question, I decided to give you a would you rather scenario.
Okay.
That's kind of a bit general, but it was a thing I was thinking about. So would you rather know that a major conspiracy was real, but not have anyone significant in your life believe you, or have made up a conspiracy that everyone around you believes, even if you were to tell them the truth?
Sorry, can you repeat that last one?
Yep. So the or is you have made up a conspiracy that everyone around you believes, even if you were to tell them the truth.
Oh, okay.
So like say you made like an offhanded joke on this show, and it just went out, and even your family believed this conspiracy that you made accidentally on the podcast.
That is the stipulation of literally everybody believing. That's tough. I feel like if you knew with absolute certainty that one conspiracy was real, then you would just become a raving conspiracy theorist, right? Like you would lose your mind. I mean, people already do that over not real conspiracy theories. So it's like,
but like being able to with absolute certainty know that like, oh, Dulce Base is real would fundamentally change my life.
Yeah, definitely. For sure. But like the idea that you can never, ever, ever convince anybody is like, that would drive you mad.
Oh, it's maddening.
But
this is a Twilight Zone episode.
Consider the following. I think I'd rather have made up a conspiracy theory that everybody has to believe, mainly because I would try and come up with something benign, but that's like a monkey's paw situation, right? Like that's
it's like
genie's
you can't
trick.
Control how this stuff goes,
Yeah.
Maybe it's something way more harmful that you said that you didn't realize. Like, you're not going to know which thing you say is going to create a conspiracy.
Oh, Jesus. That's tough. Like, I was trying to think, like, what conspiracy could I, like, get away with that answer? And I'm, like, sitting here thinking, like, there's just a million. I have to think like a genie, right? Like, I have to get into the genie mentality. But, and I'm just thinking of all the ways I could fuck myself depending on how I answer. So, that's really, really tough. But it would be, that's so hard. So are you saying that you would want a confirmation of a conspiracy? Like you would want to know for sure? Because like we do have things that are technically conspiracies, not even technically, just like things that happened. I always go to COINTELPRO. That happened. And that was a conspiracy. So we know that it happened. But you're saying like if I could like...
But you can tell other people about COINTELPRO and they will know that it exists.
Yeah. But you're saying Dolce Base exists. It's 100% real. You have all the evidence, and literally only you will ever know for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, that's tough.
I think I'm taking that one just because like I have I have problems with secondhand embarrassment and secondhand guilt. Like I really don't do a lot of cringe comedy very well because like I get so uncomfortable in situations like that.
How are you around me most of the time?
It
must be so challenging for you.
You're a lot of your favorite stuff does some like there are people you love that I just cannot stomach. Because it makes me so uncomfortable, and it's not because I think they're bad. It's just that I can't do it.
No, it's fair. Sorry, but go ahead.
No. I think that like I can look at it from kind of like a solipsistic worldview of like, knowing that this wild thing is real, then that tells me about the world and it tells me about what I want and like want to do, and so I feel like there's a freedom in that. Whereas, like, you accidentally monkey's pawing something into existence that everyone else believes, then I'm, like, fucking over everybody else in the world. And I feel like I feel some, like, feel a lot of guilt about that if that were to happen. So I think I have to take the burden on myself, the burden of knowing onto myself.
That's, you know what? I think I actually am switching my answer over because I would want to know with 100% certainty about the government UFO PSYOP program. That's what I would want to know about.
Yeah, so it's okay. So yours would be about the government PSYOP program, but
then you doom the world because like we know about Paul Benowitz, we know about all the like crazy shit that I talked about in that series. But by choosing this, I'm saying only I get to know that for sure, and that's really fucked up.
True.
God.
I hadn't thought about that aspect. Yeah. So if I will be the only person that ever knows that there were alien human hybridization experiments taking place under Dolce Base and that is
it's a real Sophie's
the burden
choice.
Of knowing.
Yeah.
Oh man,
Jesus Christ!
But I think I'm sticking with my answer.
I'm gonna have an existential crisis with this big question.
Yeah, I'll let you go have a nice existential crisis in peace after this episode's over. So to get us there, let's go ahead and take care of some business. You can follow us on Twitter at IGW Podcast.
You can follow us on Facebook.com/ItGetsWeirdPodcast.
And we're on all your favorite podcatchers from Stitcher to Google Play to Apple Podcasts to Spotify. If you listen to a podcast somewhere, look up It Gets Weird and we're probably there.
Twitch.tv/ItGetsWeird. We stream there occasionally, kind of taking a break for the holidays right now, but you can usually find us on a weekend streaming a game. I'm usually playing these days Elden Ring co-op with our good friend Colin, who comes on this show sometimes. Some of you probably know him. And then itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. What are you picking in that Sophie's choice of a big question? That's what I want to know this week, because that's a tough one. That's a real problem. So email us about that, or just send us like a really short email, like Dr. Beater. Wow, that's crazy. And then that's the whole email. You can go ahead and send that to us as well if you really want to. That will function more as a snack than a meal, but that's fine. Sometimes you want a snack. I haven't brought up the whole canon of
we eat
the
emails.
emails that you send us, and we read them out loud on the show before we dive in. Also super important, patreon.com/itgetsweird. Please go donate to our freaking show already. We have a $2 tier and we have a $5 tier. At the $2 tier, we're watching It Gets Weird TV. Let me try that one more time. We are doing a show called It Gets Weird TV where we're watching X-Files season 1. Niall and I kind of talk about X-Files and the episode, and we cover the whole shebang. And so if that sounds interesting, that's at the $2 tier. At the $5 tier, you get access to that show, It Gets Weird TV, plus our other shows where we discuss all kinds of different things. Niall has a show, I have a show. Sometimes we watch a movie, sometimes we do a movie commentary. There's all kinds of weird stuff up there. And those bonus episodes go up on the off weeks of It Gets Weird TV. So at the $5 tier, you're getting a bonus episode every single week. Whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to our main show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday. And you get access to our Discord where we're hanging out and talking directly with listeners of the show. So if that sounds cool to you, you should definitely donate. We also have a $1 tier where you don't get anything out of it except the satisfaction of kicking a tip to your favorite weird podcast saying, hey, I like what you do. If you can't donate, please tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird podcast. We are so close to the end of the year, and we need a confirmation that a congressperson has listened to It Gets Weird podcast.
Yes, that was our goal for 2022. Not sure if we're going to hit it, but there's still time. So tell all of your congressmen and take a picture of their phone with one of our episodes.
Yeah,
in the
please
middle.
don't make this be a 2023 goal, please.
Yeah. So thank you all for listening. This has been It Gets Weird, and I've been Niall.
And I'm Kyle signing out.